Welcome to the Weekly Squeak, your weekly geeky squeak with me, Chris Chinchilla. Sorry for the slightly late release this week. I had food poisoning earlier in the week and I was very, very sick. I couldn't really do anything apart from lie around feeling sorry for myself. And I'm also on the road, currently cat and house sitting for a friend in Italy. So I'm on my portable microphone, so not quite the audio quality we normally have. And there's a train line behind us. So yes, a combination of problems there. Anyway, let's get started. I have a few links to share with you. Quite a tech-heavy episode this week. I have a few links to share with you, and then an interview with Réda from the Kai Foundation, a little project I saw some time ago at the Malta Blockchain Summit. But it takes me a little bit of time sometimes to get through all the cards I get given at various events, and it's taken me this long to get round to it. And they have a blockchain powered, although quite what that means, we had to dig into a little bit. And then what it actually meant got kind of interesting. So listen to the interview later to find out some more details on that. They're blockchain powered kind of voice assistant for, well, at the moment for hospitality, for hotels, but who knows where it could be used in the future, enabling people to pay for all sorts of things in their hospitality experience. And also kind of have the device make money for people as well. It was an interesting idea, but more of that later. First, let's get started with some links. First, an interesting post from a regular on the Weekly Squeak, Stephen K. Vaughan Nichols on ZDNet. And GNOME and KDE. GNOME and KDE are two fairly well-known Linux desktop interfaces, windowing managers, whatever they exactly call themselves. I'm not 100% sure. But one of the main problems with Linux has always been fragmentation, or one of the biggest positives, depending on your perspective, the fact that there are so many options to choose from. It's quite dizzying sometimes. Even Linus Torvald, the creator of Linux, has said that fragmentation of different vendors has held the desktop back. But interestingly, GNOME and KDE are coming together to sponsor the Linux App Summit in Barcelona in November. It's not the first time they've worked together, but it's the first time they've ever run an event together. And they're kind of eager and encouraging their communities to come together to build an application ecosystem that transcends individual distributions. This has also been tried by Canonical with things like Snaps. We'll see how it goes. I sometimes wonder especially with open source communities, if people actually want community collaboration and unity, or if they like having many different standards. There's arguments on both sides, and I've often changed my opinion on whether fragmentation is better or whether standardization is better, and it kind of depends on your perspective. But I think the main point I take from KDE Communications' Paul Brown added that the desktop war is not really a thing anymore, which is actually quite true. I think Linux, as I wrote in a post some time ago, has kind of won the computing war, if not the desktop war. And next, I always love an article on computing history. This is from Jake Rosson on Mental Floss, an article on an oral history of Nintendo's Power Glove. This is a perfect opportunity for me to promote the first episode of The Enthusiastic Amateur, where I interview Sinclair Target from the 2-Bit History blog, and we talk about lots of stories from computing history. This is a post worthy of his blog, actually. I love these sorts of stories because sometimes these devices that were or weren't successful sometimes have the most interesting origin stories. And the Power Glove was fascinating. If anyone is old enough to remember it, it came from 1989, so there might be a fair few of you who don't. It was an $8,800 NASA-approved interface glove running $250,000 worth of hardware. And then the challenge was to make that work for $26 in 9 months. And this is the funny thing. We think about crazy deadlines and budgets in computing now, but actually they're probably nothing in comparison to what they used to be in the past when they were a lot tighter. It talks about many reasons that the device was successful or failed, and it kind of was successful and failed in almost equal measure, depending on where you look. Ill-conceived, too many proprietary games, it couldn't cope fast enough with reactions and interactions had to be configured and manually configured, like kind of with modern computing, hardcore game simulators and things like that, but not really in those days. And I guess it was just all too much work for too little return, I suppose. And this is a fascinating little interview with, about half a dozen people who were involved with the whole process of creating it, and the mistakes they made, the challenges they faced, how they got round them, etc., that sort of thing. And also how successful everyone thought it was going to be, how this was going to be what everybody wanted. And I don't think anyone even I suppose we're starting to get this ability to use your hands now. And of course, years later came things like the Wii, even VR headsets with the controllers they have do it in a more abstract way. Sometimes, we have this fantasy science fiction idea of what an interface should look like, but then actually what it ends up being in the long run is not what we expected, but is fundamentally better. I recommend this book a lot. I don't think I've ever recommended it on the podcast, though. This book called Make It So, a book on science fiction interfaces and how they have influenced real world interface design and vice versa. And I can't remember if there was something on the Power Glove, but I could feel like there was, because it feels like a story like that, influenced by sort of futuristic VR cyberpunk films, but fundamentally it just didn't really work because science fiction is not the same as reality. I hate to disappoint you. So if all of this interests you, then go and take a read. Next, I have covered this topic a long time ago. This is from CNN, from James Griffith. This is a post entitled, "The Global Internet is Powered by Vast Undersea Cables, but They're Vulnerable." And this topic always fascinates me because if you actually look at a map of undersea cables that basically connect the backbone of the internet, there's not that many, and they are very vulnerable, and we rely on them. We have seen many cases when one has been vandalized or more likely just damaged, and certain countries lose their internet access. But the reason why I find this most fascinating is my grandfather was actually responsible for laying some of the first versions of these, the copper wires that were kind of the precursor to the modern optic fibers we have. And the thing was, I actually was never particularly sure what ship or what the project he worked on was. And this article actually covers it. So where is it? In 1956, Transatlantic Number 1, TAT-1, the first underwater telephone cable was laid. And I'm guessing that was the project my grandfather was involved in. That would make sense. So it was quite interesting to hear that. And when I looked that up on Wikipedia, I very much confirmed that. I found the company he used to work for, which is a company called Submarine Cables, which is now owned by General Electric or Marconi, or I can't even remember anymore. But yeah, and that struck a particular chord to me because actually reading this thing that he was involved with too. This article, the latter part of it gets into a little bit of potential kind of conspiracy theories and things like this, but most of it is kind of interesting about how the cables are built, how they're laid, the vulnerability of them, why certain companies like Google and even Facebook are laying their own cables so that their services are not disrupted, which is also quite fascinating. I also just finished reading Cryptonomicon by Neil Stevenson, who covers some of this kind of as well. So it's always strange how sometimes these various topics come together to in a weird series of coincidences. And then, of course, we get into the modern story, the modern equivalence of this, the 5G infrastructure that is sort of in progress right now with companies like Huawei. And again, we come up with this issue of if we let companies instead of independent bodies, whatever that means, lay the infrastructure that we communicate through, then how secure is it really? And that's a difficult question. And apart from the sabotage issue, I'm not 100% sure if anyone ever brought this up with the submarine cables. I don't know. Yeah, we rely on them all the time. Pretty much the vast majority of internet bandwidth goes through them. And yet I wonder if anyone's ever challenged the security of those. It's pretty hard to check, really, when they're in the middle of an ocean somewhere. Anyway, I always find this stuff fascinating. It's always interesting to know, all this technology we use now and how much it still relies on a few dozen big, thick cables lying at the bottom of the ocean put there by ships. And finally, in my link section, a blog on refraction tech by Mayuk Nair. This is actually from a couple of years ago, but it popped up in a feed for some reason. This is probably a change now. How Netflix works, the hugely simplified complex stuff that happens every time you hit play. You can tell this is slightly out of date because it's talking about the releases of House of Cards, when the release of House of Cards is possibly slight of an embarrassment now than than an amazing revelation for Netflix. But anyway, that's a whole other discussion. But Netflix are responsible for creating things like microservice architecture, or at least putting it in practice, if not creating the design principles anyway, of revolutionizing the kind of widespread use of cloud computing, of CDNs, of global delivery. And let's face it, most of the time, Netflix works pretty well, no matter where you are and what sort of connection you have. And this post goes in a very abstract way into some of the ways that works. And I would have liked to actually read a bit more detail, but maybe they couldn't go into that detail. But still, very interesting. And if you're a fan of Netflix or Amazon Prime, and they do actually mention this because Netflix runs predominantly, when the post was written, on AWS infrastructure. And of course, Amazon have their own video streaming service, but much like Samsung making screens for Apple, but business is still good business. If you're selling to your rivals but still making a profit, then that's okay. And that was my links for the week. Just a few. I say I've been a little bit sick. I wasn't able to keep an eye on the news as much as I would really like to. And now, as promised, my interview with Réda from the Kai Foundation. Enjoy.
I'm a serial tech entrepreneur. I have created several tech businesses. The latest to date before the Key Foundation was called Square Break. We created a technology that made the property management business scalable. So basically, a property manager was able to deal with 10 to 12 properties by himself. And thanks to our technology, the hospitality operating system, they were able to deal with 40 to 50 properties. So basically, this company grew very fast. We raised 3 million euros in February 2016, and then we got acquired in August 2017 by Accor Hotel, which is the European leader in hotels, hospitality industry. And 6 months before the acquisition, I started looking at our fleet of homes in Europe. We had 800 homes, and I was looking at those properties with idle resources not being used, only used 3 to 4 months in a year. And I started thinking of a distributed way of sharing resources. So this is where the idea of the Key Foundation started. So basically what the Key Foundation is doing is that we are deploying a decentralized mesh network infrastructure that lives on top of a hardware that we created and that we distribute in the hospitality industry. So basically, what we provide to the hospitality industry is a device that helps them operate better, sell more services, make more revenue, and optimize their operations. And at the same time, that device is kind of a small but powerful server with a 512 gigabyte SSD drive, computing power, bandwidth, multi-level wireless communication protocols, and can be used to be leveraged by the applications of the blockchain industry, such as Storage, SIA, Qdo, or any other company that wants to have a really decentralized infrastructure that is reliable and sustainable. So this is basically what we do. All of these businesses, all of the value that is created in the hospitality industry or the decentralized infrastructure area is valued through one proxy, which is the key token. And so any kind of services that is bought in the ecosystem has a 15% commission. So people pay in fiat, but those 15% commission are being used to buy key on the market and pay back the validators, the customer, and also the service provider. So we created a way of pouring on the key token real life business value that will actually grow its underline through time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think when I encountered the product, which I think was at the Malta Blockchain Summit, it also struck me as maybe, which is what interested me, but maybe I got it completely wrong, as a voice interface as well, or did I get that completely wrong?
No, absolutely. It's a voice interface. So basically, to be able to sell that device and sell the service in the hospitality industry, we created a device that looks like a smart assistant. And one of its features is being a privacy preserving smart assistant. And we work with a company called Snips that provides us that technology layer of privacy preserving smart assistant. And this is one of the very interesting features for the hotel industry, because thanks to that, you can interact with the device and have better access to service and also to room automation, like switching off and on the lights, setting the temperature of the room, putting on the TV or any TV channel. So this is basically the kind of things that you can do with the voice, but it's only one of the features of our device. The other features are more about operations, because we are interconnected with all of the specifics of the hospitality industry, and also visual interfaces that lets the guest buy more services through them.
Yeah, and I've actually seen a few voice interface companies aim at the hotel industry. I must admit, I've never stayed in a hotel that has one. I probably don't stay in the right hotels, but it seems to be something that a few people are trying. And let's just ignore the blockchain aspects for the time being. But am I correct there? Is this something that quite a few people are trying with more high-end hotels? This sort of, I guess, replacing the traditional phone to the front desk kind of experience?
Absolutely. There are some competitors that are trying to do this kind of stuff. To be completely honest, the hotel industry is not our main focus the same way as the property management industry is, but it is for us a very interesting market because we are getting inbound from the hotels that want to install our device. But basically what we do is that we're not overselling what we do. Some of the projects, some of the technologies that we've been seeing that provide that kind of device sell themselves either as a replacement of the phone or like a tablet would be also in a property. But this is not at all the kind of positioning that we have. We are more integrated and have been thinking of the whole guest experience in a hotel room for hotels. And we also are very interconnected to some specific use cases for the hotels that are interesting for them. But also, one of the very interesting things is that this is not our end game. This is our first market because we have a very unfair advantage through our contacts, connections, and my previous company being acquired by the largest hotel group in Europe. That's actually bootstraps our deployment. The real end game is to be the first builders of the highways of the decentralized internet.
So you mean highways as in terms of a device, or what do you mean by highway specifically there?
So it's the infrastructure. So we are building the roads that Storage, SIA, Theta, Kudo, and all of these other businesses are going to use to provide their services, such as decentralized storage or decentralized CDNs or decentralized file systems. This is actually, we are providing this infrastructure. And the good thing and interesting thing is that the hotels and property managers are subsidizing this infrastructure because they are buying it for a specific reason. And at the same time, we are providing those resources to the masses of the blockchain industry. We do think that there is still 3 to 4 years for the blockchain industry and also the industry of decentralization to be very mature. But at that time, in 3-4 years, will be the biggest infrastructure out there.
Okay, so let's ask the always obvious question. I mean, and to be hand on heart, I am actually work myself sometimes in the blockchain ecosystem. I'm kind of involved with it, but I'm always pragmatic about it. So let's ask the obvious question first. Why blockchain?
So that's a very good question because a lot of people talk about blockchain and talk about crypto and tokens, and they don't even know why they're doing that. Just to give you where we came from before we started talking about blockchain, we were talking about privacy preserving distributed systems for sharing of resources. This was actually the way we were thinking about what we were building in 2016 before we even started talking about blockchain. But the very interesting thing is that what we were trying to build without blockchain was permissioned. And what we wanted to be able to do is to be more than a very private network that will provide this infrastructure. So the first devices that will provide the infrastructure will be our devices, but we want anyone to be able to provide this infra. So we had to be permissionless. So there we started talking about consensus protocols. And when we started talking about consensus protocols like PBST and everything, then we got our minds into blockchain and looking at how blockchain technologies, not only blockchain, because when you say blockchain, it's more about the way you store data with the chains of blocks. But it's more about how you deal with consensus, how you're able to say that a node is not a malicious node and actually provides value to the ecosystem. So this is the first part. So how blockchain, the storage method, is being used in our ecosystem. It's being used to store the reputation and actions of the nodes and to be chosen in rounds of validation. So if you look at our white paper and yellow papers about decentralization and proof of reputation consensus protocol that we created, thanks to some really well-known scientists that worked on Hyperledger Fabric, for example, blockchain is important to track the behavior of the nodes. But it's more about the technologies of decentralization that are important for these decentralized infrastructure devices. The second part is why, actually the very good question is why crypto? Why a token? Why should we use a token when people could just pay in fiat? That is actually a very important question. I do consider that marketplaces and capitalism kind of are rigged, and the more you work towards creating an ecosystem, if you have a company that is based on pure equity and only equity, your decisions when you have investors that are on board in your company will always go towards centralizing value into the equity. And I consider that this is really wrong when you want to build an unstoppable, unkillable ecosystem. So basically what we did, and this is very unique right now, only some companies in the blockchain industry really did that, is that there is no equity in our company. We are, as founders, do not have equity, do not own equity. It's a foundation that holds an operating company. And our only incentive, and the incentive of the investors, is through the token. So basically, we created a smart money, which is the proxy of all the value and transaction of the ecosystem. So we all, founders, investors, and actors of the ecosystem, are aligned to where the value should be, which is the token. And this is one of the reasons why we have a token in the ecosystem, because we do consider that this utility token is being used to exchange services and value in the ecosystem. And at the same time, its value will reflect the value of the ecosystem.
So maybe let's get back to the user, as it were. I mean, you have this current example of hospitality, but here let's stick to hospitality for now, and then we'll go from there. So what will people be able to do with the device and the network? What are the use cases you hope to give people?
So we have a very clear video about that where we show the usage of the device in a hotel. But basically, what you can do when you have that device in a room you can actually manage the room through voice. Switch on, switch off the lights, set the temperature at a certain value, control some of the devices, smart devices and appliances in the room. And also at the same time, the device is connected to the TV, and you can have your Spotify account or Netflix account, and you can watch anything you want on the TV. And it's also connected to the services of the hotel, and you can automatically, with voice or just by browsing with the remote control, the room service, the spa services. And we actually have some really interesting metric, is that we multiply by 3 the room service ordering thanks to the device, which is a very interesting thing for the hotels. And also, it's one of the best experience that people could have into ordering services in a hotel through our device.
Okay. And then I guess when people start doing the ordering, that's when the token comes into play.
Absolutely. There is a 15% commission that is taken from any order. And those 15% commission are taken in fiat, if you pay in dollars or euros or anything like that, and buys back tokens on the market and split into 3 ways to the guest as a cashback in key tokens, to the hotel as an additional revenue in key tokens, and also to the validators as a transaction fee. When the validated block that contains this transaction, they get 5% of the transaction as a transaction fee payout.
And so after hospitality, what are some of the other use cases you're looking at? You say you want to create the highway. Like what's the other stops on that highway? What comes after hospitality?
We don't know. We have many markets that are knocking on the door: retail, telcos, and also healthcare. But we don't want to lose focus right now. We're putting all of our energy in the hospitality market. I think that it's going to be something that will become an evidence. It will not an evidence. The evidence is in French. Like it's very, very obvious. It will be obvious for us that this will be the next market. But right now, we are really, really focused on the hospitality market.
So when you order food, for example, you're identifying here as potential partners or maybe current partners, something like Uber Eats. So delivery to the hotel, I guess. And then you also mentioned chauffeur service and things like that. So how does the payment work? Are you still paying the hotel, or does someone somehow authenticate with the device when they enter the room? How does it become personalized to me, I guess?
So basically, when you're in a hotel, the device gets provisioned with your account. That is a temporary account, and depending on the kind of hotels, could it be 4 and 5 stars? They actually pay for you for some services until you get into a certain value of services, and then they call you and tell you, "Hey, you should pay your bill before you can get more services." This is the first way, and then there is the payment with credit card. You just pay for your services with the credit card. Right now, we don't have any deals with the Uber Eats or this kind of applications. It will go through their classic kind of payment platforms, but we do have some deals with some apps that do transfer services, also room service ordering, and they actually use our SDK called KeyPay that actually enables us to have an end-to-end payment system that gets the money and also the commission when people pay with credit cards. But the most of the services are actually being paid by the hotels.
Okay. So there's I mean, I guess I was just you got no notion of having to somehow add my public key to the device or something like that. Not in the there's no traditional blockchain kind of process going on here.
No, and you know what? We do consider that blockchain crypto should be considered as TCP/IP for the internet. You shouldn't see it. You should actually benefit from it, but not have to do the technical stuff of it to get the reward of it. So we try actually you never hear about blockchain or crypto when you use the device.
And then the token itself, I mean, is the token also a way of you raising revenue, like in a sort of token sale? Or what happens with the tokens, like the tokens the foundation has, the tokens the hotels have? Do they then have to take them to an exchange to sell them or something? Like how does the token function in the network?
Yeah, I actually like your questions because it's very practical and it's really important.
I've been working in the blockchain long enough. I have to ask practical questions.
It's actually, you're right. It's a way for us to raise money because we don't have any equity to sell. So basically, people that want to get a piece of the ecosystem, because this is what we're talking about. We're talking about an ecosystem, not a company. They buy tokens, and the use of the token can be to buy more services in the ecosystem, or you could stake them. If you stake them, you gain reputation over time, and the bigger your reputation, the bigger your chances to be chosen in a round of validation and get payouts for securing the network. So it's actually a work token because you stake the token, you secure the network, and you're paid for that through real life transactions that happens in the hospitality market and also in the decentralization industry, blockchain applications, yada, yada. On the other side, we have actually a fixed initial supply of 800 million tokens. We are just right now selling 35% of the supply in a private sale and raising actually $7 million for that. And what's happening is that the supply that the foundation keeps will never be used to pay salaries, which is a complete difference from what all the blockchain companies do. We actually have a very healthy business model, because those devices, we sell them and we have a very interesting and healthy margin by selling the device. We also sell services, monthly subscription services per device per month. And the third thing, there is the commission, the 15% commission transaction fees in the ecosystem. We don't get that money because it goes to the ecosystem. It goes back to the ecosystem, but it actually grows the value of the token over time. So basically, the plan of the tokens is not to be sold to finance the teams. It's to be sold to distribute it to more people, because we want actually a bigger and bigger community being incentivized in tokens to get into the ecosystem. The bigger the ecosystem, the harder for competition it will be to actually take over our customers or our business.
So with regards to the device, I remember seeing one at the summit last year. Do you have these in prototype now? Is anyone trialing them anywhere? What's the status of the device in the network?
So the one that you saw last year was the pre-industrial prototype. And now we have industrialized the device. We have pre-sold 5,200 devices, and we are installing the first 300s in the next couple of weeks.
And is that mostly in France or in some other places as well?
So it's in France and in Morocco. Currently I'm in Morocco, and we have many big deals that are going to be announced pretty soon.
And I mean, how does that look? How does the setup look from the hotel's perspective? Do they have some kind of extra access, like a management portal or something, that they reset a device every time someone checks in and checks out? Or
everything is automated. Everything is automated. Okay. They do have a portal
hooked up to their booking system or something, I guess, or I don't know.
Exactly.
I don't really know how hotels work, but it is.
Exactly. It's actually connected to their PMSs.
Okay, cool. And have you had any feedback so far about how people are finding it?
So we have installed the first devices that didn't have any visual interface in the beginning of this year, in January, February. The feedback was interesting because they actually liked the fact to be able to manage the room, control, temperature and lights. You know what a pain it is when you're in a hotel and you're trying to switch off all the lights, but you don't find the switch for that last light in the room. So this is the kind of service that was really cool for them. But we didn't, at that time with V1.2 of the device, we didn't deliver the value of the additional service. So we iterated and we created the whole new interface, et cetera, and now it works perfectly. We have very, very good feedbacks in terms of interactions, in terms of services, either from the hotels and also from the guests, which is a very good thing for us.
And so digging into the technical side a little bit more, I'm guessing the fact that you have someone who used to work there, you're probably using Hyperledger as a blockchain, or am I wrong?
Yes. Sonia Ben-Mokhtar actually built the PBFT algorithm for Hyperledger Fabric. So, and she's the one who created proof of reputation for the Key Foundation.
I mean, I have dug a little bit into Hyperledger, but I guess it's the most well-established blockchain network that gives you private networks, some kind of access levels, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly.
Things you will need, yeah. And I mean, how have you found, bearing in mind that I guess you come from a more traditional technology background, how have you found building a technology platform, SaaS product device on top of blockchain versus just doing it the old-fashioned way? Is there ever a time you wish you just maybe taken a more traditional route, or has it been okay?
Actually, there are two things that we added in our methods as developers and also leaders in the company. Is that first thing is privacy and security first. So this is actually one of the biggest challenge that we had, because privacy first is thinking about how you build high value services without compromising the data. And by thinking that at any kind of times or moments, the personal data of the user could no longer be linked to the user. So it was really interesting because we created this by thinking about being privacy first and also security first. This was the most challenging part. The second thing is the interconnection with the blockchain. Basically, to be able to deliver the device and for business before the R&D of the blockchain was finished, we actually built the device without the blockchain in mind. We had the R&D of the blockchain happening on the side, and it's not finished yet, but we just prepared the field on the device to be able to run the blockchain part, the decentralized part. So basically, we prepared the field on the device and on the architecture of the device to be able to accept that decentralized part, parallel processing and everything. So that was the hard part in the beginning, but now it does not create any hurdle in our processes.
And the device itself, let's just, I think it's on, you mentioned some of the details, 512 gigabyte SSD, which seems kind of large. Are you also looking to manage, because you mentioned one of the use cases is things like video streaming and stuff. Is that to handle some of that? Or, I don't know, 512 gigabytes seems quite large for a device that is mostly sort of processing information back and forth.
Not really, because when you will have an app that will live on the device that is called storage, it will.
Yeah.
It will use.
I know storage.
It will use 256 gigabytes of it. Or you have SIA. If you have SIA, actually, I was yesterday in a meeting with Zach from SIA and their new person that deals with the partnerships. There will be an app that will live on top of the devices and can be managed in terms of quantity of the storage that will be made available for the SIA marketplace. So basically, we pumped up the device to be able to do its job as a node of the infrastructure.
Can I just check something there? Because as far as I remember, Storage is one of the networks that gives you tokens for access to storage space.
Exactly.
Yeah? Is that right? Am I right there?
Exactly.
So are you actually using that as a revenue stream as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
The owners of the device will be able to make money out of renting their storage, their bandwidth, and their processing power.
So that old phrase about making money as you sleep, well, I mean, hotels do that anyway, but they're making extra money as people sleep.
Exactly. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And we and we are creating this new infrastructure that everyone will be using to run their businesses in a reliable manner, because those devices will be running 24/7.
Okay, cool. All right. So, I mean, you've already said that I guess the current big plan is installing several hundred devices around France and Morocco, which is enough work, I guess, for a small team to be getting on with. And then you also said that after this, I mean, the future use cases you're still sort of figuring out. So we've got short term to very long term. But in the medium term, is there anything you're planning next on the roadmap?
We have many things that we need to decide for, but right now everything is about BD, business development. We're signing several contracts. We have in our pipe many tens of thousands of devices to be signed with some of the largest hotel groups and chains. So this is actually our priority in the short and medium term. And the more devices out there, the more value we pour into the token, and the more value we pour into the token, the biggest the value of the ecosystem is.
And how is because I always wonder when a lot of blockchain companies and projects tend to do this foundation setup. Foundation, I mean, in English anyway, although it sounds like it might be a French word originally, I'm not sure. Means something sort of specific, like a not-for-profit foundation. And you already mentioned that there's aspects of the business model that operate on that fundamental. But, I mean, some of the other aspects you've spoken about definitely sound more like a for-profit business. So do you have do you have the non-profit foundation and for-profit business, or is it still a bit unclear?
No. We don't have. Actually, what's happening? We have a for-profit business, but it belongs to the foundation.
Okay.
So actually, there is no money that goes to anyone, any person, any physical person, out of the activity of the foundation and its subsidiaries. So what's happening is that the operating company works being governed by the foundation, and the foundation's goal is to only grow the ecosystem.
And I suppose just to recap, apart from yourself and the other people you mentioned, who else do you have in your team? I guess you're going to need some hardware people, and you're dealing with a lot of kind of, I suppose hospitality is effectively enterprise style business. So a lot of business development people. What's the kind of predominant background of most of the team?
Basically, a big part of my team was from my previous companies, very seasoned tech guys. My CTO is one of the greatest CTO I've ever met in my career. We also have a hardware lead, firmware lead that works jointly with the hardware guy. And part of that team that I've been with in my previous businesses was in my previous business in hospitality. Our COO, Keredine, was one of actually was my first employee in that previous business, and he was our best sales. He grew the business in France, Europe, APAC, and we have very privileged contacts with hotels and property managers around the world. So basically, yes, it's the BD part is very hospitality focused because this is our first our first market.
Yeah.
But this is how the team looks like.
And just finally, so you mentioned the Snips connection earlier, and Jan is one of your investors and advisors. I have actually interviewed Snips in the past, last year. So are you using their voice processing?
Yes.
Is that the main aspect of the partnership?
No, it's we use their technology. This is the main aspect. So Jan is actually one of our investors because he believes a lot in the way we're deploying our device, and also the whole ecosystem part with our technology. But it's related only to Jan. It's like a personal investment. But we have some very interesting stuff that are brewing with some other people in the team at Snips.
And that was my interview with Réda from the Kai Foundation. I don't have too much to update you with after last week. I was very busy catching up with work on Monday, Tuesday, and then sick. So I haven't got much to really update you on. You can still find my new podcast at theenthusiasticamateur.com. You can still find my new roleplay game at onedaytheworldended.com. And you can find many other things that I do, including previous podcasts, show notes, newsletters, writing, etc. at christianchiller.com. I'm a little bit behind with getting new articles up, but I do have quite a lot about to come down the line soon. So watch that space. You can also tweet at me at Chris Chinch and find me on Facebook at facebook.com/ChrisChinchilla. If you have been, thank you very much for listening.